what in the world convinced you at some point in your history that you were good at sales, that you liked sales?
Well, that's an interesting question because I was really fortunate to get an entry-level job out of college. I was 25. I'd been to Vietnam, and I used all my GI Bill. And Xerox Corporation, as most people know, has invented more technology than they've never made money at than any other company in the history of the world. They invented the whole desktop, the mouse, the icons, and everything. And then they gave Steve Jobs a tour of the Palo Alto Research Center, and the rest of that is history. Xerox also invented Ethernet. They never made any money at that. But what most people don't know, Xerox invented cloud computing in 1969. And when I joined Xerox Computer Services in 1972, I was right out of college, and they had a job that was so shitty that none of their permanent people wanted it, and it was the help desk. So I started off in the help desk, and we had 50 local LA clients, city governments, distributors, and manufacturers, all hooked up to our computer with phone lines and dumb terminals. And it was usage-based revenue, fully interactive, general ledger, payables, receivables, order entry, inventory, production control, material control, et cetera, all these applications. And so I had the 3-ring binder for all of them on my desk, and people would call me, and I'd have to get them out of their messes all day long. After a year of that, I went out and got to meet all my customers that I've been working with. And
Yeah.
I'll be a little vulnerable here. A lot of them said, oh, when they finally met me, they said, we thought you were taller. But anyway, so then I got to do hands-on with live customers, helping them run their business using our applications. And if they didn't use it, there was no revenue. And so after 2.5 years, management comes to me and they said, Mike, we want you to go into sales. And I had 2 answers, no and hell no. The no was I didn't really respect those guys. They were mostly ex-IBMers because our CEO came from IBM. And every client I had, they had made promises to that we couldn't keep. They'd say, oh yeah, it'll do that. Oh yeah, it'll do that. And then they'd sign up and it wouldn't. And so I'd have to, fix that. The second problem was my violent alcoholic father was a salesman, and the last thing I ever wanted to do was be anything like him. Wow. So I said no and hell no. And they came back about a week later and said, okay, we understand your reluctance. We're going to give you a little safety. In writing, if you don't like sales, you can have your application consultant job back after 6 months. And you can keep your application consultant salary. You don't have to drop down to the sales base. So I said, okay. And then I had a boss that taught me the one thing I really didn't know how to do. I knew how to help people solve problems with our product, but I didn't know how to find prospects. And so he said, I'm going to teach you to cold call. And back then, this is probably before you were born, Steve, but cold calling was actually going into an industrial park, walking into a building, going up to the receptionist, introducing yourself and asking to see a job title.
The beautiful thing about that I love is that you're able to help them envision themselves in a particular affirmational situation. Yep. One where they feel like this guy understands me, I'm safe investigating right here, but also I can become a hero. I can get out of danger. I can get out of the stress that I'm in.
I can get out of danger. That's a great way of saying it, Steve, because he was in danger. He went to work every day with 2 C-level people crawling up all over him. And he was working 55 hours a week, and he was afraid of being fired every day he went to work.
Mm-hmm. And what I love is his brain was filling in all the details. where everyone is being trained to do a demo. Well, they're assuming this demo is solving the assumed problems that exist. And people are going, you lost me because that's not what I'm dealing with. And for you to go in and tell a story, their brain takes over and fills in all the details that they believe.
Well, if you've read What Great Salespeople Do, I started doing my research into the power of story in 2008. And I think it's UCSD in San Diego. They had somebody in an MRI machine, and they were watching their brain when the idea of, can I share a story with you? In other words, we are all trained from infancy to anticipate stories with once upon a time. And they found that the human being, when they anticipate a story, the critical left brain shuts down, the creative right brain, hooked to all our senses and emotions and everything, opens up.
Lights up. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I call it permission selling, because stories are really powerful. But no stranger is going to let another stranger walk up to them and tell them a 60-second story, especially if they're a salesperson. The whole key is to first trigger their pure curiosity. Oh, you're a materials manager. Can I share a story with you about another materials manager? And if the story is really powerful, which mine was, in 60 seconds, they went from pure curiosity to pure envy. And once he had pure envy, he said, you want to come in and look around? All the discovery resistance is gone. And I spent the next 45 minutes doing discovery.
So in your book, What Great Salespeople Do, what are the top 3 things that great salespeople do? Now, I would assume lead with a story is one of them.
Well, it's actually, they have 3 stories in their quiver. They have a customer hero story. They have their personal story of why they do what they do. And in that personal story, the struggle there has to be their own personal struggle and career. So the person buying from them comes to the emotional conclusion that they have character, that they keep their promises, that they fall down, they can get up, you know. The third story is the who I represent story, which is the story of their company, their founder, their company mission, etc. And if you think about how people buy, in most cases, the beginning of the buy cycle, they aren't even looking. So we have to get them from not looking to looking. We have to trigger pure curiosity. We have to trigger pure envy. That's phase 1. Now phase 2, now you can go in and do a demo. Now they have a buying vision. Can you really replan this complex factory overnight? Now the techies go in and demo their hearts out. And typically in the middle of the sales cycle, when the potential client is looking at details, now you go to lunch and they say, so Steve, how'd you get into this business? They express some curiosity. So we have that second story all locked and loaded, ready to go, with a story arc, with a setting, a struggle, a turning point, and a resolution. And then in phase 3, now they say, yeah, it'll work. Now we have a transition plan. Now we know how we're doing education, et cetera. So now we're in pitching the C-levels. They get the CFO to sign off on this big deal. And the C-level people in phase 3 say, so we've never heard about your company before. Who are you? And now you tell that company story that shows that your company has character, your company keeps their promises, your company takes care of their customers, et cetera. And it's basically those 3 stories locked and loaded in great salespeople. And they do it intuitively. But only 20% of salespeople are great. The other 80% need a model to follow.